What if I told you that much of our modern day social, legal, and geopolitical paradigms owed a tremendous debt to two groups of barbarians, separated by time and space, who are known mostly for the devastation they wrought upon their innocent victims? Two factions that so desired to increase their land and treasures that they literally ran roughshod over entire peoples, societies, and empires. Two powerhouses so intimidating that the mere sight of them would cause people to empty their pockets of all their money. No, I'm not talking about the Democrats and Republicans. I am, of course, referring to the Vikings and the Mongols. Vikings were maritime Scandinavian explorers originating from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Utilizing well-developed ships and navigation techniques, the Vikings, or Varangians as the Greeks called them, raided and conquered regions in Europe, often leaving devastation in their wake, killing villagers and destroying buildings. The Vikings operated in small, highly skilled teams, operating with such speed and precision that their victims rarely had the opportunity to defend, much less defeat, these marauding barbarians from the north. Eventually, the Vikings figured out that trading with locals was much more profitable than killing them. From that realization, they started developing trade routes and settlements along those trade routes. As historian John Green notes, when raiding gives way to trading, good things happen. The so-called Age of the Vikings occurred roughly between the years 750 through 1100 AD, but it could be argued, rather convincingly I believe, the Viking influence is still alive and well today throughout the Western Hemisphere. Consider that they founded some of the best organized and most dynamic states in Europe, including England, Greenland, Iceland, and Normandy, which is northern modern-day France. They also made their way to North America, but did not find the local reception to their liking, so they left. Not only that, but these vicious Norsemen even founded the Russian state, which was centered around Kiev. Following the successful raid on the Byzantine Empire, missionaries followed Vikings to Russia, where they introduced Christianity, Byzantine architecture, and the Cyrillic alphabet. The long-lasting effect the Vikings had on the world is really based around the settlements and the trading of goods, and in the process, the trading of cultures. And about 100 years following the Age of the Vikings, the Mongols started to etch themselves into the history books. Spanning the 13th and 14th centuries, the Mongol Empire was founded under Genghis Khan. Now, Genghis Khan was a masterful leader who, by unifying multiple nomadic tribes, was able to establish the largest contiguous land empire in human history, covering approximately 4 million contiguous square miles. As nomads, they were driven by the acquisition of land and goods. Sometimes this procurement was through mutually beneficial trade, sometimes through one-sided marauding. But over time, the Mongols learned the same lesson that the Vikings did. It's more profitable to trade than to raid. Their expanse included prosperous cities with extensive trade networks, resulting in the spread of many innovations from Asia to Europe, including movable type, higher mathematics, cotton, the art of calendar making, and gunpowder. Ironically, it was the use of gunpowder that brought down the Mongol rule at the hands of the Ming Empire in China. Historically remembered as ruthless barbarians, the Mongols, however, supported any religion that supported their government purposes. They allowed local cultures to survive and develop, and demonstrated an overall tolerance towards their subjects. And although the Mongol Empire was short-lasting, they did leave a legacy with the concept of merit-based promotion, the ending of feudalism, and the foundations of international law, egalitarian principles, and certainly the Pony Express. Even though they hailed from different eras and areas, there are a few similarities between the Vikings and Mongols. In the area of conquest, the Vikings and Mongols both had the same reasons for why they attacked and dominated other territories: to gain ground and resources. Vikings and Mongols both wanted to earn riches and expand their territories. Pretty basic motivations. And to keep their new subjects in line, they each ruled by fear and intimidation. When Vikings attacked villages, they destroyed buildings and killed settlers. Wherever Mongols passed by, the cities and towns were completely destroyed and filled with dead bodies and bloody ground. In either scenario, if you were lucky enough to have lived through an invasion, it wouldn't take much more convincing that you need to bow down to your new rulers and get with the program. On the trade front, following all that bloodshed, they each established open trade with other communities. After Vikings and Mongols were settled into the respective new territories, both of their cultures influenced the original culture of the settled society. Another similarity that they have is both were considered barbarians. which is derived from the Old French root word barbare, which identified peoples not part of the classical civilizations such as Greek or Roman. And it could be argued that our modern definition of barbarian, which includes savage, brutal, uncultured, uncivilized, is a direct result of the Vikings and Mongols' warring ways. Perhaps the greatest similarity in both cultures had a significant effect on the development of Russia. The Vikings founded the first Russian state, Kievan Rus, and opened the door for the missionaries to introduce Christianity, their architecture, and their alphabet. A few hundred years later, the Mongols showed up, cut the Byzantines out of the picture, effectively isolating the locals from the rest of Europe and settling the course for geopolitical positioning that we are familiar with today. So why are these two dynamic cultures similar? Because the lust for treasure and power and influence does not care where or when you existed in the annals of time. The Vikings, being agriculturists, wanted more land for their crops and herds, so they set sail from their Scandinavian homes to go get some, collecting a tremendous amount of treasure along the way. Eventually, they focused more on the trading side of the equation in order to increase their riches and influence. The Mongols, on the other hand, were a nomadic people who, by the very definition of nomadic, required them to travel great distances to support their herds. Genghis Khan was able to unite various nomadic tribes to become a nearly unstoppable force that took whatever they wanted from whomever they wanted. They also became more focused on trade for the same reasons as the Vikings. Dead men don't pay. United by an internal desire for more land, money, power, the Vikings and Mongols are forever joined in the archives of history. A few areas where the two differ begin with the Vikings being Scandinavian seafaring traders, warriors and pirates who raided and colonized wide areas of Europe. They established many lands, but were not driven by empire building. Mongols were a tribe that ruled the largest contiguous empire in world history, and for some time was the most feared empire in Eurasia. Vikings conquered their territories with long ships that were also used for trading. These ships were able to sail the open seas as well as navigate up rivers. The Mongols used a cavalry-based army specialized in horse archery. They were like modern-day tanks bearing down on hapless villagers. The Vikings had small raiding parties, unlike the Mongols, with their infantry and huge armies of several 100,000 men. In advanced military tactics, the Mongols used horses so they could go over frozen rivers to combat their enemies during the winter. They successfully conquered Russia in the winter, something neither Napoleon nor Hitler could do. In contrast, the Vikings had to literally carry their longboats over the frozen ground during the winter. For trading and governing, the Mongols administered rules more strictly, established free trade agreements, re-established the Silk Road, and were much more socially tolerant than the Vikings. The Mongols eventually established four political entities: the Yuan dynasty, the Golden Horde, Ilkhans, and Chagatai Khanate, to oversee the empire, where the Vikings were more inclined to assimilate their culture with their newly conquered culture. They really weren't interested in empire building to the same degree as the Mongols. Personally, the most glaring difference between the two is the fact that there is not a single professional sports team in the United States named after the Mongols. The Vikings are proudly represented in the National Football League, but with the Mongols, they're left on the bench. So why is it that other historical groups, such as Raiders, Buccaneers, Cowboys, Indians, 49ers, Patriots, Titans, Saints, Celtics, 76ers, Mavericks, Cavaliers, Trailblazers, Warriors, Wizards, Kings, Yankees, Royals, Rangers, Angels, Mariners, Nationals, Pirates, Brewers, Padres, Oilers, Blackhawks, Canadians, Red Devils, Islanders, Canucks, and Senators are represented, but there's no love for the Mongols? They would have such cool uniforms too. But I digress. While they were united in the lust for more stuff, the reasons for their differences are more environmental than philosophical. Geographically, the Vikings weren't going to get very far without the use of mighty ships, as there were no land routes between Denmark and England, Iceland, or Greenland. Being limited to ships also meant being limited in the number of people involved. Thus, the Vikings had to utilize smaller raiding parties because only so many of them could fit on the boats. And remember, they also needed room for all that treasure. It also helped that the Vikings didn't attack standing armies that could fight back. They attacked villages and monasteries that offered little resistance, so smaller groups were advantageous to their goals. Mongols, they roamed the Asian steppe lands with nothing but land as far as the eye could see. They became masters of archery and horseback riding. Horses are a renewable source that could travel great distances and outrun any foe. With open prairie all around them, the Mongols could move thousands of people simultaneously. By doing so, they became an unstoppable horde that could conquer established armies and occupy great lands. Geography and enemies are the main reasons for the differences in conquest and trade. The Vikings traveled upon the waters and faced small, weak foes, eventually settling in lands. The Mongols traveled overland and faced armies, eventually establishing the world's largest empire. And as for lack of a sports team, I got nothing. A legacy can be defined as anything handed down from the past, as from an ancestor or predecessor. Did the Vikings or Mongols leave a legacy for us other than tales of conquest? Yes, they did. The Vikings made the world smaller through their extensive exploration. They actually brought the shores of Scandinavia to the shores of North America. They created the Althing, believed to be the first national assembly in Europe, which had the lawmaking power of a modern-day parliament. They founded some of the best organized and most dynamic states in Europe, like England, Greenland, Iceland, Normandy. Also, they founded the Russian state, centered around Kiev, and again, introducing their culture, architecture, religious beliefs, and alphabet to them. They developed advanced techniques in metalsmithing and horticulture, such as the moldboard plow, and they gave us skiing and skating. Finally, according to Yale professor and historian Anders Winroth, quote, "The most important legacy they left us is our language. Norse words are so embedded in modern English that we're unaware of them." Check this out. With the exception of articles and prepositions, this statement is composed entirely of Norse-derived words. Then there's those rascally Mongols. They reestablished the Silk Road for the first time since the fall of the Roman Empire, reconnecting Europe and Asia. This pathway brought the printing press, higher mathematics, cotton, art of calendar making, magnetic compass, paper money, coal, and gunpowder to the Western Hemisphere. They gave us religious tolerance, merit-based promotion, the ending of feudalism, the rise of nation-states, as opposed to city-states, and the foundations of international law, egalitarian principles, and the Pony Express. They successfully united China and set Russia on a course we all recognize today. Looking over the list of deeds brought forth by the Vikings to Mongols, we see both harsh devastation and great societal advances. It would be disingenuous to focus on either the good or bad contributions, but rather it is necessary, as with any type of analysis, to see the entirety of the Viking and Mongol cultures. Two civilizations separated by time and space. They have their similarities and their differences, their horrifying acts and the progressive influences on our modern world. But most of all, we have some rich and colorful history to debate, analyze, pontificate, and ponder. Now, if we could just do something about that sports team.